The unseen observer. Lara moved quietly through the thick forest. Her dark, shimmering cloak blended with the shadows. She had chosen this remote planet because no one lived here. No cities, no people, no noise. Just endless trees and silence. It was perfect to hide. Her heart still raced every time she thought about the ones chasing her. The Orcs were ruthless. Once they locked onto someone, they never stopped until they captured or killed their target. Lara had escaped them many times, but she knew they would keep searching. That was why she stayed hidden. She built her small camp deep in the forest, where no ships could easily land. Every day, she checked for signals. Every day, there was nothing. She was safe, or so she thought. At first, the signs were small. A branch broken in a place she never walked. A strange feeling, like someone was close. But her sensors showed nothing. She thought it was just her fear playing tricks. Until one night, her fire went out by itself. Lara jumped awake. She grabbed her weapon and scanned the area. Nothing. But her fire, which had been burning strong, was gone. No wind, no rain, just gone. She waited, holding her breath. Minutes passed. Nothing. Finally, she relaxed, but she couldn't shake the feeling. The next day, she found something even stranger. Her food supply was open. One small pack of dried fruits was missing. She knew how much food she had. She counted it every morning. But now, something was gone. And it wasn't an animal. Lara whispered to herself, "Who is here?" That night, she stayed awake, hiding in the trees. She held her weapon tightly, waiting to see who or what was watching her. Hours passed. Then, just before dawn, she saw it. A shadow moved through the trees. Quick, silent. She aimed her weapon, but the figure disappeared. When she climbed down, she saw something written in the dirt near her camp. "I see you." Her heart pounded. She erased the message and packed her things. She had to leave. But as she picked up her bag, she heard a voice, a whisper in the dark. "You can run, but I will always find you." Lara spun around, weapon ready. No one was there. She scanned the area, but her sensors still showed nothing. She knew what this meant. Someone was here. Someone was watching. And they were very, very good at hiding. The shadow in the night. Lara couldn't sleep. She sat with her back against a large tree, her weapon held tight in her hands. The whisper still echoed in her mind. "I see you." She had survived many dangerous situations before. She had escaped from the Orcs, fought bounty hunters, and outsmarted trackers. But this time felt different. This wasn't just a hunter. This was something else. Something worse. The forest was silent. Too silent. Even the small creatures that usually moved through the underbrush were gone. It was as if they sensed the danger too. Lara's sharp, violet eyes scanned every shadow, every leaf, searching for any movement. Nothing. But she knew someone was there. Suddenly, a soft sound caught her attention, a faint rustle in the distance. She froze, holding her breath. Was it the wind? Or was it them? Slowly, she stood up, moving carefully, silently. She followed the sound, her every step calculated. The noise stopped. Lara frowned. She moved closer, her weapon aimed and ready. Then she saw it. Footprints. Fresh footprints in the soft earth. But these weren't her prints. They were larger, heavier, and they didn't belong to any alien species she knew. She crouched down, examining them closely. Human. She whispered to herself, confused. Humans didn't come this far into deep space. They were strong, yes. Smart, yes. But this planet was far from any human colony or ship route. Why would a human be here? And more importantly, why would a human be following her? Suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. Lara spun around, weapon raised, but there was no one there. She felt her pulse quicken. Whoever this was, they were playing with her. "Show yourself," she shouted into the darkness. No response. But then, a quiet voice whispered from the shadows, making her blood run cold. I already have. Silara's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the voice. It was close. Too close. She fired a warning shot into the trees, the blue energy beam lighting up the forest for a brief moment. Nothing. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her arm. She gasped and looked down. A small dart was embedded in her skin. She pulled it out quickly, but it was too late. Her vision blurred, and her legs felt weak. She stumbled, trying to stay awake, but the world around her spun. Before she lost consciousness, she saw a figure step out from the shadows. Tall, strong, and unmistakably human. The last thing she heard before everything went black was a calm, steady voice saying, "You should have been more careful." Silara woke up with a start. Her head was pounding, and her body felt heavy. She tried to move, but her hands were tied with a strong, unbreakable cord. She was sitting against a tree, and her weapon was gone. Good. You're awake. She turned her head sharply. The human stood a few feet away, leaning against a tree with a confident smirk. He had short, dark hair, sharp eyes that seemed to see everything, and a scar across his left cheek. Who are you? Silara demanded, struggling against her bonds. The man chuckled softly. The one who's been watching you. Her eyes narrowed. Why? He stepped closer, crouching down to meet her gaze. Because you're interesting. The Joraks want you dead. The whole galaxy wants you dead. And yet, here you are, still alive. That makes me curious. Silara clenched her teeth. If you're working for them, just finish it. The man shook his head. I don't work for the Joraks. In fact, I don't work for anyone. Not anymore. She frowned. Then why are you here? He smiled, but there was something cold in his eyes. To see what makes you so special. Silara stared at him, trying to understand. What do you want from me? The man stood up and started pacing. Information. I want to know why the Joraks are so desperate to find you. What are you hiding? I'm not hiding anything, she snapped. He raised an eyebrow. Liar. Silara felt a surge of anger. I don't owe you answers. The man smirked. No, you don't. But let me make one thing clear. I found you when no one else could. I've been watching you for weeks. I know your routines, your weaknesses, your fears. If I wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead. She swallowed hard. He was right. She had always been careful. No one had ever gotten this close. Who are you? She asked again, her voice softer this time. The man knelt beside her and whispered, Carter. And trust me, Silara. I'm the least of your problems right now. Silara's eyes widened. You know my name. Carter chuckled. I know a lot more than that. Before she could ask anything else, a sudden explosion echoed through the forest. Carter's smile faded. He pulled out his weapon and looked towards the sky. They found you, he muttered. Silara's heart raced. The Joraks. Carter nodded. Looks like the real fun is about to begin. He knelt down and cut the cord around her wrists. Silara rubbed her hands, still confused. Why are you helping me? She asked. Carter looked at her, his expression serious. Because I'm not the only one watching you. And trust me, you're going to need me. As the sound of footsteps and mechanical drones filled the air, Silara realized one thing. She wasn't safe anymore. And the human who had been watching her was now her only hope. The mysterious human. Silara ran through the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. The distant echoes of explosions shook the ground beneath her feet. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let the Joraks catch her. Beside her, Carter moved swiftly and silently. His expression was calm, focused, as if this was just another day for him. Silara glanced at him, still unsure if she could trust him. A human, here, in the middle of nowhere, tracking her for weeks. It didn't make sense. Keep moving, Carter whispered without looking at her. They're close. Silara gritted her teeth, I know that, she shot back. Suddenly, a sharp mechanical sound filled the air, a drone scanning the forest. Silara froze, but Carter grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a thick tree. Stay quiet, he whispered. The drone hovered nearby, its red lights sweeping through the trees, searching. Silara held her breath, her body tense. She could feel Carter's steady grip on her arm, grounding her. After what felt like an eternity, the drone moved away, disappearing into the distance. Carter let go of her and leaned against the tree. They're using scout drones. That means the ground units aren't far behind. Silara narrowed her eyes. How do you know so much about them? Carter gave a small, humorless smile. Let's just say, I've had my fair share of run-ins with the Joraks. She crossed her arms. And yet, you're still alive. Impressive. Carter chuckled softly. Right back at you. Silara studied him carefully. His clothes were worn but practical, designed for stealth and survival. A small scar ran down his left cheek, and his dark eyes held a sharpness that made her uneasy. This was not a man to underestimate. Why were you watching me? She asked again, more firmly this time. Carter sighed, as if he was tired of the question. Because you're interesting, he repeated. You've managed to stay hidden from the Joraks for this long. Not many can do that. Silara frowned. So, what? You admire me? He shook his head. No, I needed to know why. What makes you so special that the Joraks are willing to send their best hunters after you? Silara's heart skipped a beat. She looked away, her mind racing. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. Carter noticed her hesitation. Ah, he said softly, so there is something you're hiding. Before Silara could respond, another explosion rocked the ground. Carter's expression turned serious. We need to move. Now. They sprinted through the forest, weaving between trees and jumping over fallen branches. Silara's breathing was fast, but Carter's was steady. She hated to admit it, but he was good. Too good. As they ran, Silara couldn't shake the feeling that Carter was more than he seemed. He moved like a soldier, but there was something else, something deeper. After what felt like hours, they finally stopped in a small clearing. Carter crouched down, pulling out a small device from his pocket. What's that? Silara asked, peering over his shoulder. Scanner, he replied, checking for signals. I need to know how close they are. Silara knelt beside him. And Carter's face hardened. Too close. She sighed. Great. He turned to her. We need to set a trap. Silara raised an eyebrow. A trap? Against the Joraks? Are you insane? Carter smirked. Probably. But it's our best chance. She shook her head. We can't fight them. There are too many. Carter's eyes locked onto hers. We don't need to fight them all. We just need to slow them down. Silara hesitated. Why are you helping me? You could have left me behind. Carter's smirk faded. Because I'm not the only one watching you. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? Carter stood up, his gaze distant. There are bigger threats out there, Silara. And if the Joraks want you this badly, it means you're important. I need to know why. Silara bit her lip. She couldn't tell him everything. Not yet. Carter sighed. Look, I don't care what your secret is. But right now, we need to survive. So, are you in or not? Silara took a deep breath. She didn't trust him, but she didn't have a choice. Fine, she said. What's the plan? Carter's smirk returned. Follow me. They spent the next hours setting up traps, hidden explosives, tripwires, and diversionary devices. Silara was impressed. Carter's knowledge of tactics was unnerving. As they worked, Silara couldn't help but ask, Who trained you? Carter paused for a moment before replying, The best. She frowned. That's not an answer. He chuckled. It's all you're getting. Just as they finished, the sound of footsteps echoed through the forest. Carter's eyes darkened. They're here. Silara gripped her weapon tightly. Ready? Carter nodded. Always. The first Jorax soldier stepped into the clearing, scanning the area. Carter whispered to Silara, "Wait for it." The soldier moved closer and triggered a tripwire. An explosion sent him flying back. "Now," Carter shouted. Silara fired at the incoming soldiers while Carter moved like a ghost, taking them down one by one. But for every soldier they defeated, more arrived. As the battle raged on, Silara realized one terrifying truth. Carter wasn't just a human. He was a predator. And he was always watching. The hunters have arrived. Silara's breathing was shallow as she crouched behind a fallen tree. The air was thick with smoke from the traps they had set off, but she could still hear the unmistakable mechanical hum of Jorax drones above. The ground trembled under the heavy footsteps of their hunters. Carter knelt beside her, scanning their surroundings. His sharp eyes missed nothing. Even with enemies closing in, his face remained calm. "They're faster than I expected," he muttered. Silara gripped her weapon tightly. "They always are." Carter gave a short nod. "Then we need to be smarter." Before Silara could respond, a loud voice echoed through the forest. "Silara, there is no escape." Her blood ran cold. She knew that voice too well. It belonged to Commander Virek, one of the most feared Jorax hunters. Carter glanced at her. "Friend of yours?" Silara shook her head. "The opposite." Virek's voice continued, slow and taunting. "We know you are here, and we know you are not alone. Surrender, and we might let your human friend live." Carter smirked. "Nice to know I've made an impression." Silara's eyes narrowed. "He's bluffing. They don't take prisoners." Carter's smirk faded. "Then we'd better not get caught." Suddenly, a drone spotted them, its red light locking onto their position. Before it could send a signal, Carter aimed and fired, destroying it in one shot. "Time to move," he said, grabbing Silara's arm. They ran deeper into the forest, but the Jorax were relentless. Energy blasts scorched the ground around them. Silara fired back, hitting one of the pursuing soldiers, but more kept coming. "Any bright ideas?" she shouted over the noise. Carter smirked. "Always." He pulled out a small device from his pocket and tossed it behind them. Seconds later, a bright flash and a deafening sound erupted, temporarily blinding and disorienting their pursuers. "Let's go," he urged. They sprinted through the trees until they reached a steep cliff. Silara's eyes widened. "We're trapped." Carter scanned the area quickly. "No, we're not." He pointed to a narrow ledge along the cliffside. "Can you handle heights?" Silara glanced at the ledge and back at him. "Do I have a choice?" Carter grinned. "Not really." They carefully made their way along the ledge, the drop below them dizzying. Silara focused on each step, refusing to look down. Carter moved ahead of her, his every movement precise. Behind them, the Jorax were getting closer. Silara could hear their metallic footsteps growing louder. "We won't make it," she whispered urgently. Carter's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Trust me." As they reached a narrow cave opening, Carter stopped and pulled out another device. Silara watched as he attached it to the cliff wall. "What is that?" she asked. "Insurance," he replied with a wink. They slipped into the cave just as the first Jorax soldiers reached the ledge. Carter pressed a button on his wristband, and the device exploded, causing part of the cliff to collapse. The Jorax were forced to retreat, giving them a temporary reprieve. Inside the cave, Silara caught her breath. "You came prepared." Carter shrugged. "Always." She sat down on a rock, exhaustion washing over her. "Who are you really?" Carter leaned against the cave wall. "Just a guy who doesn't like being bored." Silara gave him a sharp look. "That's not an answer." He sighed. "Fine. I was trained by a special human unit. We handled missions no one else could. Tracking, infiltration, survival. You name it. She raised an eyebrow. And now? Carter's eyes darkened. Now I work alone. Silara studied him carefully. Why me? Why risk your life to help me? Carter's expression softened. Because you're important. And not just to the Joraks. Someone else is looking for you. Someone. Dangerous. Silara's heart skipped a beat. Who? Carter shook his head. I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. Before Silara could ask more, a distant sound echoed through the cave. Carter's face turned serious. They're still searching. We don't have much time. Silara nodded. Then let's finish this. Carter smiled. Now you're speaking my language. As they prepared for the next battle, Silara realized something unsettling. The Joraks were terrifying, but Carter was something else entirely. And she wasn't sure if that was a good thing. The alliance of enemies. Silara stared at Carter, the human who had turned her world upside down in just a few hours. She wasn't sure if she hated him or trusted him, but she knew one thing. They needed each other to survive. The cave was dark and narrow, but it gave them a moment to breathe. Outside, the Joraks were regrouping, searching for them. Silara could hear the distant hum of their scanners and the mechanical clicks of their weapons. We can't stay here long, Carter whispered, his eyes focused on the cave entrance. Silara nodded. They'll find us soon. Carter smirked. Then let's make sure they regret it. Silara frowned. Do you ever stop smiling in dangerous situations? Carter chuckled softly. Not when it annoys my enemies. She shook her head, unable to hide a small smile. You're impossible. Thanks, Carter replied, his grin widening. But the moment of lightness vanished as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the cave. Carter's face turned serious. They're here. Silara gripped her weapon tightly. We're outnumbered. Carter glanced at her. We're always outnumbered. Doesn't mean we lose. Silara's eyes narrowed. You're awfully confident for someone with no backup. Carter's smirk returned. Who says I have no backup? Before she could question him, a Jorak soldier appeared at the cave entrance. Silara fired instantly, hitting its shoulder. The soldier stumbled back, but more were coming. Carter moved fast, too fast for a normal human. He ducked under Silara's line of fire and tackled one of the soldiers, disarming it in seconds. Nice shot, he said over his shoulder as he punched another soldier in the face. Silara rolled her eyes. Less talking, more fighting. The cave turned into chaos. Silara's energy blasts lit up the darkness, and Carter's swift, brutal attacks left no time for the Joraks to regroup. But they kept coming. They're not stopping. Silara shouted, breathing heavily. Carter wiped sweat from his brow. They never do. Silara knew he was right. The Joraks were relentless. She had spent months running from them, but now she was trapped. Suddenly, Carter pulled her behind a rock. We need to change the plan, he whispered. Silara glared at him. We had a plan. Carter grinned. Of course. Step 1. Survive. Step 2. Annoy the Joraks. Step 3. Die horribly. Silara interrupted, sarcasm in her voice. Carter laughed quietly. No, step 3 is the fun part. Silara sighed. What's the fun part? Carter's eyes sparkled, turning the hunters into the hunted. She stared at him, realizing something important. Carter wasn't just brave, he was dangerous. Fine, she said. What do you need me to do? Carter's smile faded, replaced by a focused expression. I need you to trust me. Silara hesitated. Trust wasn't something she gave easily. But right now, trust was all they had. Okay, she whispered. What's the plan? Carter quickly explained. They would split up. Silara would draw the Joraks deeper into the cave, while Carter circled back and attacked them from behind. It's risky, Silara said. Carter nodded. The best plans always are. She took a deep breath. See you on the other side. Carter winked. I'll be watching. Silara rolled her eyes but felt a strange comfort knowing Carter was out there. She moved through the cave, making noise to attract the Joraks. They followed her, their heavy footsteps echoing through the tunnels. She fired at them, drawing them in further. Suddenly, she heard a voice in her earpiece. Carter's voice. Hold them there. I'm almost in position. Silara gritted her teeth. Hurry up. The Joraks closed in, their weapons ready. Silara's heart pounded. She was running out of time. Then, everything changed. Explosions rocked the cave as Carter attacked from behind. The Joraks were caught off guard. Carter moved like a shadow, taking them down one by one. Silara seized the moment, firing at the remaining soldiers. Together, they overwhelmed the Joraks. When the last soldier fell, Silara looked at Carter. Not bad, she said, breathing heavily. Carter grinned. I aim to please. Silara shook her head, but she couldn't deny it. Carter was good. As they left the cave, Carter turned to her. We make a good team. Silara's eyes softened. Maybe, but this isn't over. Carter nodded. No, it's just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Silara felt something she thought she had lost. The truth about Silara. Carter and Silara moved silently through the dense forest, the remnants of their battle with the Joraks still fresh in their minds. The air was thick with tension, not just from the danger that surrounded them, but from the unspoken questions between them. Carter finally broke the silence. We need to talk. Silara didn't stop walking. No, we need to survive. Carter sighed, stepping in front of her. We won't survive if we don't trust each other. And trust means answers. Silara's violet eyes locked onto his, filled with a mixture of anger and fear. Why do you care so much? Why are you even here, Carter? Carter's expression softened. Because I know what it's like to run from something that won't stop hunting you. Silara's anger wavered, replaced by curiosity. Who did you run from? Carter gave a short, bitter laugh. Not who. What? My own people. Silara's eyes widened. Humans hunted you. He nodded. I was part of a special unit. We were trained to do things no one else could. But when I found out the truth behind our missions, I walked away. They didn't like that. Silara's voice softened. I'm sorry. Carter shrugged. It's in the past. But right now, we need to focus on why the Joraks want you so badly. Silara hesitated, her mind racing. She had kept her secret for so long, but something about Carter made her want to tell the truth. Finally, she spoke. The Joraks don't just want me. They fear me. Carter's eyes narrowed. Why? Silara took a deep breath. Because of what I am. Carter listened intently as Silara explained. My species, the Zenari, were known for one thing. Our connection to the energy that flows through the universe. We could manipulate it, control it. It made us powerful. Too powerful. Carter nodded slowly. And the Joraks didn't like that. Silara's voice trembled. They saw us as a threat. So they destroyed us. My home, my people, all gone. Carter's jaw tightened. But you survived. Silara nodded. Barely. I've been running ever since. Carter's mind raced. So you can manipulate energy. Like a weapon? Silara shook her head. It's more than that. I can feel the life around me. I can bend energy, heal with it, or destroy. Carter's eyes darkened. That's why they want you dead. Silara's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, and they won't stop until I'm gone. Carter placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we'll make sure they don't succeed. Before Silara could respond, a distant rumble shook the ground. Carter's eyes narrowed. That's not good. Silara's face paled. It's them. They're bringing in a warship. Carter's mind raced. We need to find cover. They ran through the forest, the sound of the warship growing louder. The massive vessel loomed overhead, its lights scanning the ground. Carter cursed under his breath. We can't outrun that. Silara's eyes glowed softly. We don't need to. Carter looked at her, confused. What are you talking about? Silara's voice was calm. I can stop it. Carter's eyes widened. Are you insane? That thing is a flying fortress. Silara's gaze was steady. Trust me. Carter hesitated, then nodded. What do you need me to do? Silara's voice was firm. Keep them distracted. Carter smirked. Distraction is my specialty. As Carter opened fire on the warship, drawing its attention, Silara closed her eyes, focusing on the energy around her. She felt the pulse of life in the trees, the wind, even in the ship above. Slowly, her hands began to glow, and the air crackled with energy. Carter fought off the soldiers that descended from the ship, but he kept glancing at Silara. Whatever she was doing, it was working. Suddenly, Silara raised her hands, and a massive wave of energy shot into the sky, hitting the warship. The ship trembled, its systems flickering. Carter grinned. Not bad. But Silara's strength was fading. She fell to her knees, her breathing ragged. Carter rushed to her side. Hey, stay with me. Silara's voice was weak. I need more time. Carter nodded. Then I'll buy you some. He turned to face the approaching Jorak soldiers, his eyes filled with determination. As he fired his weapon, keeping the enemy at bay, Silara focused her energy one last time. A final blast of light shot from her hands, hitting the warship's core. The ship exploded in a burst of fire and smoke, crashing to the ground. Carter shielded Silara from the blast. When the dust settled, he looked at her with a mixture of awe and respect. Remind me never to make you angry, he joked. Silara smiled weakly. I'll try. Carter helped her to her feet. We need to move before more of them show up. Silara nodded. Carter, thank you. He grinned. Hey, someone's got to keep an eye on you. As they disappeared into the forest, Silara realized something. She wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. But she also knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. The real battle was yet to come. The human always watches. The forest was eerily silent after the destruction of the Jorak's warship. Smoke still lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of burned metal and scorched earth. Silara leaned against a tree, her energy drained from the intense battle. Carter stood beside her, scanning the area with sharp eyes, always on alert. We need to keep moving, Carter whispered, his voice low but urgent. Silara nodded weakly. I need a moment. Carter crouched beside her, concern flickering in his gaze. You pushed yourself too hard back there. I had no choice, Silara replied, her voice barely audible. If I hadn't, we'd both be dead. Carter smirked. True, but next time, let me handle the heavy lifting. Silara chuckled softly. You? Against a warship. Carter's grin widened. Hey, humans are known for doing the impossible. Before Silara could respond, a faint sound caught Carter's attention. He stiffened, his hand immediately going to his weapon. Silara noticed his change in posture. What is it? Carter didn't answer. Instead, he signaled for her to stay quiet. His eyes scanned the forest, searching for the source of the sound. Then, almost too quiet to hear, came a whisper. Human, you cannot hide. Silara's eyes widened. Virak. Carter nodded grimly. He's still alive. Suddenly, a blast of energy shot past them, hitting the tree behind them and sending splinters flying. Carter grabbed Silara's hand and pulled her to her feet. Run, he shouted. They sprinted through the forest, energy blasts lighting up the darkness around them. Carter led the way, weaving through the trees with practiced ease. Silara followed closely, her breathing heavy but determined. Split up, Carter called out. Meet me at the river. Silara hesitated but nodded. She veered to the left while Carter disappeared into the shadows on the right. The Jorax soldiers, led by Commander Virek, spread out, determined to capture their prey. Carter moved silently, his training kicking in. He was no stranger to being hunted. Every step he took was deliberate, every breath controlled. He knew Virek was close, but Carter had an advantage. The Jorax didn't understand humans as well as they thought. He found a high vantage point in a tree and waited, his weapon ready. It didn't take long. Virek appeared below, scanning the area with a cold, calculating gaze. "Come out, human," Virek called. "You cannot win." Carter smirked to himself. That's what they all say. He fired a shot, narrowly missing Virek on purpose. The Jorax commander turned sharply, his weapon firing back, but Carter was already gone. He moved swiftly, always staying one step ahead. "You're wasting your time," Carter's voice echoed through the forest. "Humans don't like being cornered." Virek growled in frustration. "You think you are clever, human, but I will find you." Carter's voice was calm and confident. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Meanwhile, Silara reached the river, her body still weak, but her mind focused. She knelt by the water, trying to regain her strength. She could feel the energy around her, drawing it in slowly. "I have to help him," she thought. "I can't let him fight alone." She closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind. She could feel Carter's presence, steady and strong. But she also felt Virek's dark, menacing energy. Time was running out. Carter knew he couldn't keep this up forever. He needed a plan. Fast. As he moved through the forest, he noticed something, a narrow canyon nearby. An idea formed in his mind. If I can lure him there. Carter purposely left a trail, making sure Virek would follow. It didn't take long. The Jorax commander, confident in his tracking abilities, pursued without hesitation. Carter reached the canyon and waited. As Virek approached, Carter stepped out from the shadows. "Looking for me?" Carter taunted. Virek raised his weapon. "You have nowhere to run." Carter grinned. "Who said I was running?" Before Virek could react, Silara appeared behind him, her hands glowing with energy. She unleashed a powerful blast, hitting Virek and sending him flying into the canyon wall. Carter quickly set off a series of explosives he had planted earlier, causing the canyon walls to collapse, trapping Virek beneath the rubble. Breathing heavily, Silara looked at Carter. "Did you know I was coming?" Carter smirked. "I always know." Silara shook her head, a smile forming on her lips. "You're impossible." "Yeah, but you love it," Carter replied with a wink. As they walked away from the canyon, Silara asked, "What now?" Carter's expression turned serious. "The Jorax won't stop, and there's someone else out there who wants you. We need to find out who." Silara nodded. "Then let's find them." Carter grinned. "I'll be watching." Silara laughed softly. "I know." And together, they disappeared into the night, ready for whatever came next. Because no matter how dangerous the galaxy was, Carter always had one advantage. He was always watching.